Ladies and gentlemen, Mara, I want to start with a story. Imagine you're meeting someone for the first time, maybe a colleague or a new acquaintance, and in the first few minutes you start to feel a sense of discomfort. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something about their body language, their energy, or even the way they're responding to you feels off. Then, just as quickly, another person enters the room. The atmosphere shifts. This person smiles warmly, makes direct eye contact, and you can feel the difference immediately. There's an openness, a calmness that draws you in. Well, the truth is, we're all reading people all the time, not through magic, not through mind reading, but through something far more simple and accessible: observation. But here's the thing, we don't always know how to read these signals consciously. In a world that constantly demands quick judgments and snap decisions, we've learned to rely on surface-level information, the words people say, the way they dress, or how they look. But here's the real power: the deeper insights come when we look beyond the obvious. When we choose to understand the whole person, their mind, their body, and their heart, we tap into a new level of understanding, a level that can change the way we interact with the world. Let's start with body language. When someone enters a room, what do you notice first? Is their posture open or closed? Are they standing tall, or do they appear hunched and withdrawn? The way someone carries themselves can tell you a lot about their mood or how they're feeling in that moment. Are they relaxed and confident, or do they seem tense and defensive? But here's the thing, it's not just the body, it's the energy. We all have a certain energy that we bring into a room, and the people around us pick up on that energy sometimes more than we realize. You can feel it in the way someone speaks, the way they carry themselves, even the way they breathe. You know the difference between a person who is truly engaged in the conversation and someone who's checking their watch, mentally somewhere else. And then there's the words. Now, I know we all want to take people at face value, but words are only part of the story. It's easy to tell someone, "I'm fine," but how many times have you heard those words and felt that something else was going on? Tone, pace, body language, they all play into what someone is really saying, even when their words seem to contradict their feelings. The key is listening for what's unsaid, the subtle shifts in their voice, or the pauses that reveal more than their words alone. This is where empathy comes into play. Empathy is not just about listening, it's about listening with your heart. It's about tuning into your own experiences to help you understand what someone else might be feeling. And let me tell you, empathy is one of the most powerful tools for truly seeing someone. But context matters too. When we're trying to understand someone, we have to remember that their behavior is shaped by the situation they're in. What's happening in their life? What's happening right now in this moment? We can't truly read people if we ignore the environment around them. Someone who seems short with you at work might actually be dealing with a family crisis. Someone who seems overly quiet in a social situation might just be introverted or feeling socially anxious. So here's where we have to lean into the art of asking questions. Asking someone how they're really doing, not just the surface level, how's it going, but a deeper, how are you feeling right now, or what's been on your mind today? These questions invite people to share their truth, and when we listen deeply to the answers, we learn far more about a person than we could through just observing their behavior alone. Now, I want to invite you to trust something powerful: your intuition. You've probably had moments when something about a person felt right or something felt off, even when you didn't have any concrete reason for it. Your intuition is not magic, it's a tool that's built on years of learning and experience. If we can quiet the noise of judgment and fear and just trust our gut, we can often sense the deeper truths that people are holding. And ultimately, when we want to truly read people, we must create a space where they feel safe to be themselves. It's not about dissecting their every move or trying to figure them out. It's about showing up with authenticity and openness. When we show others that we are willing to be vulnerable and honest, we invite them to do the same. And that's where the real connection happens. So the next time you're in a room with someone, I challenge you to lean in not just with your eyes, but with your heart. Observe, listen, feel, and most importantly, connect. Because when we see people for who they truly are, when we choose to understand, we unlock the power of human connection, and in that space, we all have the chance to thrive. Have you ever walked into a room and without a word being spoken, instantly sensed something about the people in it? Maybe you felt the warmth of connection, or perhaps there was an underlying tension you couldn't explain. We've all had those moments where the energy in a space tells us something, and often it tells us everything before the first sentence is even uttered. I think that's one of the most beautiful yet often overlooked powers we have the ability to observe, to truly see what's happening around us without needing to be told. It's like a sixth sense, this subtle, instinctive way we read the room, the vibe, the people. We pick up on things that our brains don't necessarily have words for, but that our hearts and minds understand deeply. Think about the first few seconds of meeting someone new. Often we judge them based on what we can immediately perceive, the way they look, the way they carry themselves. But here's the magic: those first few seconds, those first impressions can reveal more about a person than you might think. What if we leaned in a little deeper and actually took the time to notice things that usually go unnoticed? The small gestures, the flicker of a smile, the way someone's eyes light up when they talk about something they care about, or the way they shift uncomfortably when they feel threatened or vulnerable. These are the clues that make up the unspoken language of human connection. I want you to think about the last time you met someone. Maybe it was at work or at a social event. What did you notice first? Maybe you noticed the way they stood or the way their energy made you feel. Maybe you heard their voice, but also felt the subtle undertones in it, the confidence, the hesitation, the warmth, or perhaps the guardedness. You didn't need to know their entire life story to sense all of this. All it took was a moment, a pause, and the willingness to pay attention. Because the truth is, we're all constantly communicating, even when we're not speaking. We give away so much of ourselves through our posture, our expressions, the rhythm of our movements. We are like open books, constantly telling a story without saying a word. The power of observation isn't just about reading people in the traditional sense. It's about taking a step back, becoming present in the moment, and allowing yourself to absorb the things you might otherwise overlook. And it's in that space, in that quiet awareness, that you can begin to see things for what they truly are. It's not about making assumptions. It's not about labeling someone or rushing to conclusions. It's about curiosity, about showing up with an open heart and an open mind. It's about asking yourself, what is this person's story? What are they feeling right now? What's behind their eyes? You'd be amazed at what you can learn, not just about others, but about yourself in the process. So I want to invite you today to embrace this power of observation, not as a tool of judgment, but as a bridge to deeper connection. To see beyond the surface, beyond the mask we all wear, and into the soul of who someone truly is. When you open yourself to this kind of awareness, the world around you begins to change. People become less like strangers and more like stories waiting to be understood. And in that understanding, there's not only connection, there's compassion and there's growth. When we encounter someone for the first time, it's easy to make snap judgments based on what we can immediately see. We look at their clothes, their posture, the way they speak, and we make assumptions. We categorize them in our minds based on what we believe we know. But what if we took a different approach? What if, instead of reducing a person to a single moment, a single glance, we chose to see them as a whole person, a complex, multifaceted individual shaped by experiences, dreams, fears, and hopes that extend far beyond what's visible in front of us? Because when you really think about it, the truth is that no one's story starts when we meet them. There's so much more beneath the surface. A person is not just the expression on their face or the words they choose to speak in a conversation. They are the sum of everything they've lived, the joys, the losses, the struggles, the triumphs, the ways they've been hurt, and the ways they've healed. Every wrinkle on their face tells a story, every gesture they make is a reflection of a history they carry, and every moment of silence speaks volumes about the thoughts and feelings that have shaped them. When we take the time to see the whole person, we begin to understand that there's so much more going on than what we can judge in a first interaction. Instead of labeling someone as quiet or loud, confident or shy, we start to consider the reasons behind their behavior. Maybe someone is quiet because they've learned over the years that speaking out can leave them vulnerable to criticism. Maybe they're not shy, but instead they're choosing their words carefully because they've been misunderstood in the past. Maybe someone comes across as distant or even cold because they've been hurt by betrayal and learned to protect their heart in ways that aren't always obvious. It's in those moments of deeper understanding that we can begin to meet people where they truly are, not where we assume them to be. Because the truth is, we all have parts of ourselves that we hide, parts that are fragile, parts that need care, parts that have been scarred by life. And when we take the time to recognize that, to hold space for that complexity, we begin to relate to others, not just on the surface level, but in a way that honors their full humanity. I've seen it time and time again, people who seem closed off or unreachable, but when you start asking the right questions, when you offer a little patience, a little empathy, you start to uncover a whole different side of them. You realize that they weren't ignoring you, they were simply waiting for the right moment, the right person to feel safe enough to open up. And isn't that what we all want? To be seen, not just for who we appear to be, but for who we really are deep down. We all have stories that aren't told in a first impression. The shy person in the corner might be a deep thinker, someone who's carrying the weight of 1,000 quiet ideas. The person who seems overly confident might actually be struggling with imposter syndrome, fighting a quiet battle inside. We can never know all of this until we give ourselves the space to look beyond the labels, to challenge our assumptions, and to truly see a person for who they are in their entirety. To understand the whole person means embracing their contradictions, their quirks, their messy, imperfect selves. It means acknowledging that everyone has their own struggles, even if they're not visible to the naked eye. It means opening our hearts to the complexity of another human being without the need to fix them, judge them, or even fully understand them. Because in the end, understanding isn't about having all the answers, it's about showing up with a willingness to sit with the questions, to be present with another person's experience, and to honor the parts of them that they might not even be able to put into words. When we choose to see the whole person, we don't just gain insight into who they are, we also come to understand ourselves more deeply. We start to realize that just like everyone else, we too are more than the sum of our parts. We have our histories, our struggles, our vulnerabilities, and when we extend that grace to others, we find that the world around us becomes a lot less about judgment and a lot more about connection. It's a kind of understanding that asks us to be patient, to be open, and to be willing to see what is often invisible, to hear what is often unsaid, and to connect with others in ways that transcend the surface and speak to the heart. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and felt like you were hearing one thing, but something in your gut told you that there was more going on? Maybe their words were calm, but their body was tense. Maybe they smiled, but their eyes didn't quite match the expression. Or perhaps you walked into a room and without anyone saying a word, you could feel the unspoken communication buzzing in the air. That's the power of body language, and it's one of the most powerful ways we communicate without saying a single word. We often think of communication as a transaction of words, as if the message we deliver is carried solely by the sentences we string together. But in reality, our bodies are constantly speaking, sending signals that are just as important, if not more so, than the words we choose. From the way we hold ourselves to the smallest shift in our posture, body language conveys our emotions, our intentions, and even the stories we've never spoken out loud. Think about the way you feel when someone leans in during a conversation. That small gesture, that subtle shift of their body toward yours is an invitation, a signal that they're engaged, interested, and ready to connect. Now contrast that with the way you might feel when someone crosses their arms, stands with their back to you, or looks away while you're talking. Those physical cues, though often unconscious, tell a story of disconnection, of discomfort, or of defensiveness. And here's the thing, those signals often speak louder than words. In many ways, we trust body language more than speech because it feels authentic. Our bodies don't lie. Even when we try to mask our emotions with carefully chosen words, our posture, our facial expressions, the way we move betray us. You've probably noticed that when someone is genuinely excited, their whole body lights up. They lean forward, their hands gesture as if they can't contain their enthusiasm, and their face radiates a kind of joy that is almost impossible to fake. But when someone is nervous, their hands might tremble, their shoulders may tense up, or they might subconsciously fidget as if trying to relieve the unease inside. It's all there, visible to anyone who's paying attention. And it's not just about reading the emotions of others. Body language also plays a huge role in how we express ourselves and how we project our own feelings into the world. When we stand tall, shoulders back, chin up, we signal confidence. But when we slouch, fold into ourselves, or shrink away, we signal the opposite. And you don't need to be in a formal interview setting to see the effect of this. Every day, we send messages to the world through how we carry ourselves. Think about the power of a handshake. That simple gesture can communicate warmth, confidence, or hesitation even before a single word is exchanged. But here's the beauty in it: body language is something that we all have the ability to tune into. It's not just reserved for the experts or the observant few. It's available to anyone who is willing to pay attention. And this is where the power lies, because when we start to read the subtle signals that people are sending, we unlock a whole new level of understanding. We start to hear what isn't being said, to perceive what's being felt but not expressed, and that's where real connection happens. There's a quote by the famous psychologist Albert Mermier, who found that in communication, about 55% of the message is conveyed through body language. That's more than half of what someone is trying to say. Just think about that for a moment. More than half of our communication is nonverbal. So if we're not paying attention to how someone is standing, how they're moving, the tension in their face, we're missing out on the full picture. We're only hearing part of the story. Now, I know it can be easy to fall into the trap of assuming we understand someone's body language based on our own interpretations or biases. But here's where we have to be careful. Our interpretation of someone's body language can be influenced by our own experiences, emotions, and assumptions. So instead of rushing to conclusions, we have to be mindful and take a moment to feel what is being communicated both in ourselves and in others. And when we can do this, when we can truly see beyond the surface and read the cues that people are offering us, we move into a space of deeper empathy and connection. For example, maybe someone seems withdrawn and we immediately think they're being rude or disinterested. But what if, in reality, they are simply overwhelmed? Maybe their arms are crossed not because they're closing themselves off, but because they're feeling protective or because they don't know how to process the emotions they're carrying. When we slow down and pay attention, when we look beyond the surface level of posture and gesture, we begin to see a fuller, richer picture of who someone is in that moment. And that, my friends, is where connection begins. When we choose to read body language with care, we start to understand not just what people are saying, but how they're feeling. And in doing so, we open ourselves to a world of possibilities. We start to create relationships not just based on the words spoken, but on the unspoken understandings that emerge when we truly pay attention. Because at the end of the day, it's not just the words that matter, it's the heart and soul behind them, and body language is the key that unlocks those deeper truths. When we communicate with each other, we often place a lot of importance on the words we choose. We believe that what we say is the essence of our message, the heart of our communication. But the truth is, words are only half the story. They may be the most obvious part, but they are not the whole picture. And sometimes the most powerful messages are those that are carried in the spaces between the words, in the pauses, the tone, the rhythm, the silences. Think about the last conversation you had where someone said, "I'm fine," but everything in their voice, their body language, their eyes told you something different. You might have heard the words, but you felt the truth, the sadness, the frustration, the unease, even though it wasn't explicitly stated. It's that feeling we get when the words don't match the energy behind them. And it's a reminder that communication goes far beyond mere vocabulary. In fact, sometimes the words we choose can be a form of protection, a way of covering up what we really feel, or a way to keep ourselves safe. We say what we think we should say, but the truth, the real meaning, often lies in what we don't say. Consider the way we speak when we're truly vulnerable, when we let down our guard. Words in those moments can feel fragile, even inadequate. Sometimes we stutter, we pause, we struggle to find the right expression because we're wrestling with emotions that are difficult to put into language. But in those moments, it's not the fluency or precision of the words that matter, it's the rawness, the sincerity, the courage it takes to speak them. And often the most honest conversations are the ones where words fall short. Have you ever been in a room where someone was speaking and yet you knew they weren't really saying what they meant? Maybe their words were carefully chosen, but their tone was flat, or there was an odd tension in the air, and something about the moment didn't quite add up. Words alone don't always convey the full spectrum of what we're feeling, especially when we're dealing with complex emotions. Sometimes we tell a story with our words, but we leave out the parts that feel too vulnerable, too uncomfortable, or too difficult to share. And that's where we have to pay attention, not just to what's being said, but to what's being left unsaid. The power of listening isn't just in hearing the words, but in being attuned to the silence between them. It's the pause before someone answers, the way their voice trembles just a little when they speak about something they care deeply about, or the way their words speed up when they're nervous or slow down when they're trying to process something hard. Words might form the structure of our communication, but the nuances, the emotional truths, are revealed in the spaces around them. Think about the times when words fail us, those moments when no combination of sentences seems sufficient to express what we're really feeling. We've all had those experiences when we're facing something so profound that words simply cannot contain it. Whether it's grief, love, fear, or joy, sometimes the most powerful moments of connection happen when the words run out and all that's left is the shared understanding in the silence, in the look across the room, in the touch of a hand, or in the tear that doesn't need to be explained. Those are the moments when we truly hear someone, not through what they've said, but through what they've allowed us to feel. In fact, much of human connection happens in the subtleties. Consider a moment when you've shared something deeply personal and the person you're speaking with doesn't offer much in the way of words. At first, it might feel awkward, maybe even uncomfortable, but over time, you begin to realize that their silence is actually a form of listening, a way of being present without trying to fix or rush you. In those moments, the absence of words is just as powerful, if not more so, than the words themselves. It's the presence in the moment that allows the real meaning to sink in, that helps us connect with the other person in a deeper way. What's fascinating about this is that words are often the least reliable part of our communication. It's easy to say something and have it misunderstood, especially when we don't have the ability to express exactly what we mean. But when we pay attention to the body language, the tone, the expression, the way someone is breathing, we get a much fuller picture of what's happening inside them. This is why, even in moments of miscommunication, we can still feel understood, because what we communicate isn't confined to just the words we speak. It's the full message that is being sent out, the combination of what's said, how it's said, and what's felt. That's the gift of truly listening. We're not just hearing words, we're reading between the lines. We're attuning ourselves to the emotional landscape beneath the surface. Words will always have their place in communication, but they're not the whole story. In fact, sometimes the real message is hidden in what's not being said. And when we become aware of that, when we stop focusing solely on the words and start listening to the unspoken signals that are all around us, we open the door to a deeper, more authentic connection. So when you're in a conversation, take a moment to listen more closely, not just to the words, but to the feelings behind them, to the body language that accompanies them, to the silences that stretch between them. The story is always bigger than what's being said, and when we start to listen to the whole story, not just the words, we start to understand each other in a way that truly transcends language. Empathy is one of those words that's often thrown around, but it's also one of those concepts that's deceptively simple. We talk about it as if we all understand it, as if it's just about feeling sorry for someone or offering a kind word in times of struggle. But true empathy, the kind that moves us to action, the kind that truly changes lives, goes so much deeper than that. Empathy is the ability to step into someone else's world, to feel what they're feeling, not just intellectually, but with your heart. It's the art of putting yourself in another person's shoes, but it's also the courage to sit with their pain, their fear, their joy without trying to fix it or run away from it. Think about the times when you've been in pain, whether emotional or physical. Often what you needed more than anything was someone who could just be there, someone who didn't rush to change the situation, someone who didn't feel the need to fill the silence with advice or empty platitudes, but someone who saw you, who truly understood the depth of your experience. That's the power of empathy. It's the gift of seeing another person in their fullness and offering them the space to be seen and heard without judgment. In a world that constantly pushes us to be faster, more efficient, more productive, we often forget the incredible power of simply being present for someone. We forget how much it means to say, "I see you," without adding anything else. Because empathy isn't about taking someone's pain and making it your own. It's not about fixing them or offering solutions to their problems. It's about allowing them to feel safe enough to express what they're going through and showing them through your presence that they don't have to face it alone. When we empathize, we connect, not just on the surface level, but on the deepest, most human level. We break down the barriers that divide us, and we come together in the understanding that in this moment, we are more alike than we are different. It doesn't matter whether we've lived through the same experiences or share the same beliefs. When we open ourselves to another person's feelings, when we really listen, we create a space where the human experience is shared, where vulnerability can exist without shame. And in that space, real healing can happen. There's something truly magical about empathy. When we extend it to someone, we're not just offering a shoulder to lean on, we're offering a mirror. We're showing them that what they feel is valid, that their experience matters, that their humanity is enough. Too often, we're conditioned to believe that we have to be strong, that we have to have all the answers, that vulnerability is a weakness. But when we approach someone with empathy, we're offering them permission to be human, to feel what they feel, and to be exactly where they are without fear of being judged or dismissed. But here's the thing, empathy isn't just about responding to other people's pain. It's about understanding the fullness of who they are. It's easy to empathize with someone when they're suffering, when they're grieving, when they're down. But empathy also means celebrating someone's joy, their triumphs, their victories as if they are your own. True empathy is not just about reaching out when things go wrong. It's about connecting with others in all seasons, in the highs and the lows, in the moments of success and in the moments of doubt. When we can celebrate someone else's happiness without feeling threatened or diminished, we create a space for more joy in the world. And yet, we often shy away from empathy, especially when it feels too intense, too uncomfortable. We see someone else's pain, their struggle, and it triggers something inside of us, a fear, an insecurity, or maybe just a deep discomfort with feeling that level of emotion. So we pull away, we disengage, but I challenge you to lean in, to move toward that discomfort instead of away from it. Because it's only when we truly sit with someone else's pain that we understand our own. It's in these moments of deep connection that we realize we're not alone in our suffering. We see that the fear and pain we carry are part of the human condition, shared across time and space, and in that realization we find the strength to be more compassionate, not just with others, but with ourselves. Empathy has the power to change the way we interact with the world. It has the power to build bridges where walls once stood, to create communities where isolation once reigned. When we open ourselves to empathy, we invite more than just understanding. We invite transformation. Empathy challenges us to look beyond our own perspective and to see the world through the eyes of another. It requires us to listen with not just our ears, but our hearts. And when we do that, something incredible happens. We become more human, more real, more connected. The beauty of empathy is that it's not a finite resource. It's not something that runs out when we give it away. Instead, the more we practice it, the more we have to offer. Empathy grows and multiplies. It deepens our relationships, softens our hearts, and strengthens our capacity for compassion. And when we begin to lead with empathy, to see others with open hearts and minds, we create a ripple effect that can change everything. We have the power to transform the world one act of empathy at a time. We have the ability to heal, to connect, and to bring light into the darkest places. So let's lean in. Let's choose to see each other, to truly listen, and to be present in the lives of those around us. Because when we do, we give the most profound gift there is the gift of understanding, of being truly seen, and of walking this journey together. There's a quiet power in asking questions, a power that has the potential to open minds, to unlock doors that have been closed for far too long, and to shift perspectives in ways we often don't expect. It's something we often take for granted, this art of questioning, because we all ask questions every day. But what if we paused for a moment and really considered the depth and significance of the questions we ask? What if, instead of simply asking for information, we asked with the intent to understand, to connect, to truly see the world and the people around us? The art of asking questions is not just about seeking answers, it's about creating space for dialogue, for discovery, for curiosity. When we ask the right questions and when we ask them with genuine curiosity, not just to fill a silence or to make small talk, we invite others to share pieces of themselves they may have never shared before. Think about it, a question asked with intention doesn't just open a door to new information, it opens a door to understanding, it opens a door to empathy, to connection, and to the possibility of seeing the world through someone else's eyes. And when we do that, everything changes. Asking questions with curiosity is not the same as interrogating someone. There's a difference. A question that comes from curiosity isn't driven by judgment or a desire to confirm what we already believe. It's driven by a true, open-hearted desire to understand. When we ask with curiosity, we're not trying to control the conversation or steer it in a certain direction. We're opening ourselves to the unknown. We're inviting the other person to take us on a journey into their world, to share their experience, their thoughts, their feelings in a way that may surprise both of us. And in that exchange, something powerful happens. We become more human. We become more connected. Think about the last time someone asked you a question that made you stop and think. Maybe it was a simple question, but it was asked with such sincerity and genuine interest that you felt seen, heard, and valued. Maybe it was a question that made you reflect on something you hadn't even thought of before, something buried deep inside, waiting to be acknowledged. Questions like that don't just move information around, they move emotions. They shift perspectives, they invite growth. They challenge us to think beyond our current frame of reference, to stretch ourselves, to consider possibilities we hadn't considered. The power of asking questions lies in their ability to create connection, to break down barriers. Think about how many times we hesitate to share our thoughts or feelings because we fear being misunderstood or judged. We don't always know how to articulate what we're experiencing. But when someone asks us a question with empathy and curiosity, when they genuinely want to know what's going on inside us, we're given permission to open up, to be vulnerable, to share a piece of ourselves that might otherwise remain hidden. The act of being asked without judgment creates a kind of safety, a space where we feel comfortable revealing the truth of our experiences. Questions also have the power to shift the dynamic in a conversation. How often do we get caught in the trap of talking at each other, of rushing to share our own stories and opinions, without truly listening to the other person? It's easy to forget that conversations are meant to be a two-way street, a dance of mutual exchange, not a one-sided performance. But the act of asking a question brings the focus back to the other person, and that shift can be transformative. It says, I want to understand you, not just speak at you. I value your perspective, and I am open to hearing what you have to say. Some of the most impactful questions we can ask are the ones that don't have easy answers. They're the questions that challenge assumptions, that encourage deep thinking, that inspire new ways of seeing the world. These are the questions that provoke growth, questions like, what would happen if we looked at this differently, or what if we didn't have to be perfect to be worthy, or even what is it that you truly need right now? By asking these kinds of questions, we allow people to go beyond the surface level, to reach into the depths of their own thoughts and feelings. We create a space where they can bring their full selves to the conversation, not just the parts they think are acceptable, but the messy, unpolished, authentic parts too. And in that space, we don't just learn about them, we learn about ourselves. We begin to see the ways in which we've built walls around our own vulnerabilities, the ways in which we've been afraid to ask questions of our own. Because in truth, the questions we ask others often reflect the questions we're afraid to ask ourselves. The beauty of asking questions is that it doesn't require us to have all the answers. In fact, the best questions are the ones that don't have immediate answers at all. They're the ones that spark curiosity, that open up a dialogue without forcing closure. The best questions don't have to be solved, they simply need to be asked. And in that asking, we invite the unknown, the mystery, the magic that comes from real human connection. We live in a world that often values certainty and quick solutions, but when we ask the right questions, we invite complexity, nuance, and depth. We invite conversations that matter, that create change, that foster understanding. And the more we practice the art of asking questions, of asking with genuine curiosity, of asking with the intent to understand, not just to respond, the more we unlock the beauty and richness of the world around us. We start to see the people in our lives not just for what they do or what they say, but for who they truly are: complex, beautiful, deeply human beings. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, pause and ask, what's the question that really needs to be asked here? What's the question that can deepen this exchange, that can open us both to something new? Because when we start asking the right questions, we begin to see the world in a whole new light. And in that seeing, we unlock the potential for deeper, more authentic connection. As we move through life, we are constantly interacting with others, whether it's in our personal relationships, in our workplaces, or within our communities. The ability to read people, to understand what's beneath the surface, and to truly listen is a skill that can transform those interactions. But it's the art of asking questions that deepens that connection, that takes us beyond the surface and into the hearts and minds of others. When we ask with curiosity, when we listen with empathy, we open doors to deeper understanding, to more meaningful exchanges, and to the kind of relationships that are grounded in trust, respect, and authenticity. The questions we ask and the way we ask them can create space for vulnerability, for growth, and for healing. And in a world that often feels fragmented and divided, it's the power of those questions asked with compassion and intention that can help bring us closer together. So I invite you to approach every conversation with a sense of curiosity. Ask the questions that matter, be present for the answers, and let them lead you to new perspectives, to new possibilities, and to a richer, more connected way of being. Because when we choose to see others, to ask the right questions, and to listen deeply, we change the way we engage with the world, and in doing so, we create a world that is kinder, more compassionate, and more full of understanding. And that is a world worth building, one question at a time.